The paddle wheel churned the muddy Mississippi waters as Rose Valentine gripped the iron railing of the riverboat, her knuckles white beneath her gloves, wondering if the man waiting at the dock in Missouri would be anything like his letters promised. The year was 1872, and Rose had left behind everything she knew in Philadelphia to answer an advertisement for a bride in the Western Territories. Her circumstances had been desperate, with her father's death leaving her penniless, and her only alternative being a marriage to a cruel banker 3 times her age. The letters from Harrison Xavier had arrived like salvation itself, written in a careful hand that spoke of loneliness, hope, and the promise of a good life on a cattle ranch near the small Missouri town of Independence. Rose was 22 years old, educated beyond what most women of her station could claim, with copper-colored hair and green eyes that her mother had always said held too much fire for polite society. Perhaps that was why she had never married in Philadelphia, despite her family's once respectable standing. She asked too many questions, read too many books, and refused to simper and faint at appropriate moments. The riverboat journey had taken 3 weeks, each day carrying her further from the life she knew and closer to a future that both terrified and thrilled her. She had shared a cramped cabin with 2 other women, one a widow heading west to live with her son, the other a young girl barely 18 who cried herself to sleep each night. Rose had tried to comfort them both, but her own fears kept her awake in the darkness, listening to the endless churning of the paddle wheel and wondering what kind of man would pay for a wife to be delivered like cargo. The captain's bell rang out across the deck, announcing their approach to the Independence landing. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs as she smoothed down her traveling dress, a modest affair of dark blue wool that had seen better days but was the finest thing she owned. She had pinned her hair up carefully that morning, studying her reflection in the small mirror and trying to see what Harrison Xavier would see when he looked at her for the first time. Would he be disappointed? His letters had asked for a photograph, but Rose had possessed none to send. She had described herself honestly in her replies, neither embellishing nor diminishing the truth. She was not a great beauty, but neither was she plain. She was educated, healthy, and willing to work hard. Most importantly, she was desperate enough to travel 1,000 miles to marry a stranger. The Missouri shoreline came into view, and Rose could see the wooden dock jutting out into the river like a crooked finger. A small crowd had gathered to meet the boat, faces blurred by distance and the morning mist rising from the water. She searched for a man standing alone, someone who might be scanning the deck for her, but there were too many people and her eyes strained against the glare of sunlight on water. The riverboat's horn blasted 3 times, deep and mournful, as the captain maneuvered the vessel toward the dock. Deckhands rushed about with ropes and poles, their shouts carrying across the water. Rose moved to collect her single trunk, her entire life packed into one worn leather case that had belonged to her father. It contained 3 dresses, some undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a small collection of books she could not bear to leave behind. As the boat bumped against the dock, Rose's stomach twisted with nervousness. This was real. This was happening. In moments, she would step onto that dock and into a new life with a man she had never met. The letters had been kind, even tender at times, but letters could lie. Men could lie. What if Harrison Xavier was nothing like he had portrayed himself? What if he took one look at her and sent her away? But where would she go? She had spent her last dollar on the boat passage and had no family left in Philadelphia. She was committed now, for better or worse. A plank was lowered and passengers began to disembark. Rose waited her turn, her trunk heavy in her hands, descending carefully onto the weathered wood of the dock. The smell of the river filled her nostrils, thick and organic, so different from the sea air of Philadelphia. Her legs felt unsteady after 3 weeks on the water, and she stumbled slightly, catching herself before she fell. "Miss Valentine." The voice was deep and uncertain, coming from behind her. Rose turned, her heart in her throat, and found herself looking up into a pair of warm brown eyes set in a weathered, honest face. Harrison Xavier was not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something immediately appealing about him. He was tall, at least 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man who worked outdoors. His skin was tanned and lined from the sun, making him look older than his stated 28 years, and his dark hair needed a trim, curling slightly over his collar. He wore clean denims, a pressed white shirt and a leather vest, with a wide-brimmed hat held respectfully in his hands. But it was his expression that struck Rose most deeply. He looked at her with such open hope, such vulnerable anticipation, that her fears began to quiet. This was not the face of a cruel man or a liar. This was the face of someone just as nervous and desperate as she was. "Yes," Rose said, her voice catching. "I am Rose Valentine. You must be Harrison Xavier." His face broke into a smile that transformed his features, making him suddenly, unexpectedly attractive. "I am. I'm real pleased to meet you, Miss Valentine. Your journey was all right. You look tired." "It was long," Rose admitted, "but I survived it well enough." Harrison reached for her trunk, taking it from her hands before she could protest. His fingers brushed hers, and Rose felt a strange jolt at the contact, the first time a man had touched her, however innocently, in months. He seemed to feel it too, because he pulled back quickly, color rising in his cheeks. "I have a wagon waiting," he said, gesturing toward the street beyond the dock. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch. I thought maybe we could stop at the hotel restaurant for some lunch first, if you are hungry. Give you a chance to rest a bit before the journey." The consideration in his offer touched Rose. "That would be very kind, thank you." As they walked through the busy dock area, Harrison kept a respectful distance, neither crowding her nor walking so far ahead that she felt abandoned. He nodded greetings to several people, clearly known in the town, and Rose noticed curious glances being cast her way. No doubt word would spread quickly that Harrison Xavier's mail-order bride had arrived. The thought should have embarrassed her, but Rose found she was beyond such concerns. Let them look and gossip. She had made her choice, unconventional though it was, and she would hold her head high. The hotel restaurant was a modest establishment with clean tables and checkered cloths. Harrison held out a chair for Rose, and she sank into it gratefully, her legs still adjusting to solid ground. A waitress approached, eyeing Rose with open curiosity, and Harrison ordered coffee and sandwiches for them both without consulting Rose. She should have bristled at the presumption, but she was too tired to care and too grateful for someone else making decisions. When the waitress left, an awkward silence fell between them. Harrison turned his hat in his hands and Rose folded her hands in her lap, both of them unsure how to begin. Finally, Harrison spoke. "I want you to know, Miss Valentine, that I meant everything I wrote in my letters. I am looking for a true partner, not just someone to cook and clean. The ranch is small but profitable, and I can provide a good home. I know this is all strange and frightening, but I promise to treat you with respect and kindness." Rose met his eyes, searching for any sign of deception and finding none. "May I speak plainly, Mr. Xavier? I wish you would, and please call me Harrison." "Very well, Harrison. I will call you that if you call me Rose." She took a breath. "I came here because I had no other choice. My father died and left debts that consumed everything we had. I was facing a marriage to a man I despised or destitution. Your letters offered a third option, and I took it. But I want you to know that while I agreed to marry you out of necessity, I intend to honor that commitment fully. I will be a good wife to you, Harrison. I will work hard, and I will try to make a home for us both. In time, I hope we might even find affection between us." Harrison's expression softened. "That is honest, and I appreciate it. Truth is, Rose, I am in much the same position. I have been alone on that ranch for 3 years since my parents passed. I have tried courting local girls, but none of them want the hard life of a rancher's wife. They want merchants or bankers, men who live in town and wear fancy suits. I am a simple man with simple needs, but I am lonely. I want a home with laughter in it, maybe children someday if God wills it. I want someone to share my life with, and I am hoping that someone might be you." The coffee arrived, hot and strong, and Rose wrapped her cold hands around the cup. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. "Your letters mentioned cattle and horses." Harrison's face lit up as he began to describe his home, and Rose found herself relaxing as she listened. He spoke of 100 acres of good grazing land, a herd of 200 cattle, and a dozen horses. He described a sturdy house built by his father, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor, plus a wide front porch that caught the evening breeze. He talked about his hands, 2 ranch workers named Samuel and Thomas who helped with the cattle and lived in the bunkhouse. He mentioned neighbors, the closest being the Patterson family 5 miles south, with 4 daughters and 3 sons who often helped each other during branding season and harvests. As Harrison talked, his nervousness faded, replaced by obvious pride in his land and his work. Rose could see that this was a man who loved what he did, who found meaning and purpose in the hard labor of ranching. It was so different from the life she had known in Philadelphia, where success was measured in social connections and inherited wealth. Here was a man who built his success with his own hands, who measured his worth in healthy cattle and good horses and land that produced. "It sounds wonderful," Rose said honestly when he finished. "Nothing like Philadelphia at all. You think you will miss it? The city, I mean." Rose considered the question. "I will miss what it was before my father died. I will miss the library and the theater, the museums and bookshops, but the city I left behind was not the same place I grew up in. That city died when my father did. This feels like a chance to start fresh, to build something new." Their food arrived, simple but plentiful, and they ate in more comfortable silence. Rose found herself studying Harrison when he was not looking, noting the calluses on his hands, the weathered lines around his eyes, the way he ate with efficient, unself-conscious movements. He was entirely different from the refined men she had known in Philadelphia, but not in a bad way. There was an honesty to him, a lack of pretense that she found refreshing. When they finished eating, Harrison paid the bill and helped Rose to her feet. "There is one more stop I would like to make before we head to the ranch, if you do not mind." "Of course." He led her down the street to a small church with a white steeple. Rose's heart began to pound as she realized his intention. They were going to be married, here and now, with no ceremony or preparation. She should have expected this. There was no point in waiting, and Harrison likely wanted the marriage formalized before taking her to his home, protecting both their reputations. The minister was an elderly man named Reverend Collins who greeted Harrison warmly and looked at Rose with kind, knowing eyes. "So this is the young lady from your letters," he said. "Welcome to Missouri, Miss Valentine. Are you ready to become Mrs. Xavier?" Rose swallowed hard. "I am as ready as I will ever be, Reverend." "That is honest enough. Come, let us make this official before the Lord." The ceremony was brief and simple, with the minister's wife and a passing parishioner pulled in as witnesses. Rose repeated vows she barely heard, her mind reeling with the enormity of what was happening. Harrison's voice was steady as he promised to love and honor her, and when the minister instructed him to kiss his bride, he leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to Rose's, the briefest of touches that nonetheless sent warmth flooding through her body. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Xavier," Reverend Collins said with a smile. "May God bless your union with many years of happiness." And just like that, Rose Valentine became Rose Xavier, wife to a man she had known for less than 2 hours. The wagon ride to the ranch passed in a blur. Rose sat beside Harrison on the wooden seat, her new husband guiding the horses with practiced ease along a rutted dirt road that wound through rolling hills and open prairie. The landscape was so vast and empty compared to the crowded streets of Philadelphia that Rose felt she could breathe properly for the first time in months. The sky stretched endless and blue overhead, and the wind carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. Harrison pointed out landmarks as they traveled, naming distant farms and describing the land with obvious affection. Rose tried to pay attention, but exhaustion was catching up with her, the early morning departure combined with the emotional strain of the day leaving her drained. Her eyes kept drifting closed, her head nodding forward, until she jerked awake with a start. "You can lean on me if you need to rest," Harrison said quietly. "I will not let you fall." Rose hesitated only a moment before allowing her head to rest against his shoulder. He was solid and warm, and the steady rhythm of the wagon combined with his presence lulled her into a light doze. She was aware of him adjusting his arm to support her more comfortably, of his hand touching her waist briefly to steady her when the wagon hit a rut. These small kindnesses spoke more to her than any words could have. When Rose woke, the sun had moved lower in the sky, and Harrison was guiding the wagon down a long drive toward a house in the distance. She sat up quickly, embarrassed to have slept on him, but he just smiled and nodded toward the view ahead. "Welcome home, Rose." The house was larger than Rose had expected, a solid 2-story structure built from dark wood with a wide front porch just as Harrison had described. Behind it stood a large barn, several outbuildings and fenced pastures where cattle grazed in the afternoon light. It was rustic and simple, but there was something deeply appealing about the scene, a sense of permanence and security that Rose had not felt in a long time. 2 men emerged from the barn as the wagon approached, both wearing the rough clothes of ranch hands. Harrison brought the horses to a stop and jumped down, coming around to help Rose descend. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her down, and Rose felt that strange jolt again at his touch, a warmth that spread through her body and made her skin tingle. "Samuel Thomas, this is my wife, Rose," Harrison said, pride evident in his voice. "Rose, these are my hands. They help run the ranch and are good men." Samuel was older, perhaps 40, with gray threading through his beard. Thomas was younger, maybe 25, with a gap-toothed smile. Both men removed their hats and greeted Rose with shy politeness, clearly uncertain how to behave around the new mistress of the house. "Pleased to meet you both," Rose said warmly. "I hope we will work well together." "Yes, madam," they chorused, and then retreated back to the barn, leaving Rose and Harrison alone. Harrison carried Rose's trunk up onto the porch and opened the front door, then turned to her with an uncertain expression. "There is a tradition, I believe, about carrying a bride over the threshold." Rose felt her cheeks warm. "I have heard of it. May I?" she nodded, and Harrison scooped her up into his arms with surprising ease. Rose gasped and instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her through the doorway and into the house. He set her down gently in the front hallway, and for a moment they stood close together, neither moving away. Rose could feel the heat of his body, smell the scent of leather and sunshine that clung to him, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Welcome home," Harrison said softly, and the tenderness in his voice made Rose's heart ache with unexpected emotion. The house was simply furnished, but clean and well-maintained. Harrison gave her a brief tour, showing her the kitchen with its large stove and pump sink, the parlor with comfortable chairs and a stone fireplace, and upstairs, the 2 bedrooms. The master bedroom held a large bed covered in a faded quilt, a wardrobe, and a washstand. The second bedroom was smaller, clearly unused, with a narrow bed and empty shelves. "I thought you might want your own space," Harrison said, gesturing to the smaller room. "Until you are comfortable. I do not expect anything from you, Rose. We can take this as slow as you need." Rose was touched by his consideration, even as a small part of her felt disappointed. She had steeled herself for the reality of the marriage bed, had prepared herself mentally for fulfilling what she knew were a wife's duties. To have Harrison offer her time and space was both a relief and confusing. "Thank you," she said. "That is very kind. I will bring up your trunk and let you settle in. Dinner is usually around 6. Nothing fancy, but I promise it is edible. I have been cooking for myself for 3 years now." After Harrison left, Rose sat on the narrow bed in what was apparently to be her room and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been Rose Valentine, unmarried and uncertain. Now she was Rose Xavier, wife to a rancher in Missouri, living in a house on the western frontier. The change was so sudden, so absolute that it felt almost dreamlike, but this was no dream. This was her life now, for better or worse. Rose unpacked her trunk methodically, hanging her few dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her books on the empty shelves. Her mother's Bible she placed on the bedside table, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. If her mother could see her now, would she be proud or horrified? Rose liked to think proud. Her mother had always valued courage and practicality over convention. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Rose, dinner is ready if you would like to come down." The meal was simple but good. Beef stew with fresh bread that Harrison admitted he had bought from a neighbor that morning in anticipation of her arrival. They ate at a small table in the kitchen, and Harrison asked her about Philadelphia, about her family and her life before. Rose found herself talking more than she had intended, describing her father's work as a clerk, her mother's early death when Rose was 15, the years of managing their household with ever-dwindling resources after her father's illness made it impossible for him to work. "You have had a hard time of it," Harrison said when she finished. "I am sorry for that, but maybe things will be better here. I hope they will be." "What about you?" Rose asked. "Your letters mentioned your parents passed away, but you did not say much else about your life." Harrison's expression grew somber. "My pa bought this land 30 years ago when it was still rough territory. He built the house and the barn, started the herd from nothing. My ma came west with him, left behind her family in Tennessee to follow him here. They worked hard their whole lives to make this place successful. 3 years ago, there was a fever that came through the territory. It took them both within a week of each other. Samuel and Thomas helped me bury them on the hill behind the house, under the cottonwood tree where Ma always liked to sit and watch the sunset. I am so sorry, Harrison. Thank you. I miss them every day. Pa taught me everything about ranching, about reading the land and the weather, about treating animals right and working honestly. Ma taught me about keeping a home, about finding joy in simple things. I try to honor their memory by keeping this place running well." Rose reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "They would be proud of you, I can tell." Harrison looked down at their joined hands, and his fingers curled around hers, warm and rough with calluses. "I hope so. And I hope you will come to be happy here too, Rose. I know it is not what you are used to, but I will do my best to make it a good home for you." That night, Rose lay in her narrow bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the house and the countryside beyond. She could hear the soft movements of Harrison in the room next door, the settling of wood, the distant lowing of cattle. Through her window, she could see more stars than she had ever imagined existed, scattered across the black sky like diamonds on velvet. The vastness of it all should have been frightening, but instead Rose felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. She had married a stranger today, but that stranger had shown her more kindness and consideration in a few hours than most men of her acquaintance had shown in years. He had given her space and time, had asked for nothing from her except her presence. Perhaps this marriage, born of necessity and desperation, might become something more. Perhaps in time, they might even find happiness together. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that Rose found surprisingly comfortable. She woke early with the sun, dressed quickly, and went downstairs to find Harrison already up and working on breakfast. He insisted she did not have to cook if she was still tired from her journey, but Rose refused to be idle. Together, they prepared simple meals and ate in companionable silence or easy conversation, learning each other's habits and preferences. After breakfast, Harrison would head out to work with Samuel and Thomas, and Rose would begin learning the routines of running the household. The house had been maintained well enough by Harrison alone, but it clearly needed a woman's touch. She scrubbed floors and windows, beat dust from curtains, and reorganized the kitchen to be more efficient. In the afternoons, she would walk the property, learning the lay of the land and the locations of the various pastures and outbuildings. Harrison was patient with her questions, explaining the workings of the ranch in detail. He showed her how to gather eggs from the henhouse, how to milk the cow kept for household use, how to recognize which plants in the kitchen garden were ready for harvest. Rose absorbed it all eagerly, determined to be useful and capable in this new life. In the evenings, they would sit on the front porch and watch the sunset, talking about their days or simply enjoying the quiet. Harrison would tell her stories about the ranch and the territory, about difficult winters and good harvests, about neighboring ranchers and the occasional troubles with rustlers or wild animals. Rose would tell him about books she had read, about the world beyond Missouri that she had only experienced through words on pages. These conversations revealed depths to Harrison that his letters had only hinted at. He was intelligent despite his lack of formal education, with a natural wisdom born of observing the world around him closely. He had opinions on politics and religion that he shared thoughtfully, and he listened to Rose's views with genuine interest, even when they disagreed. He never talked down to her or dismissed her thoughts as foolish, as so many men in Philadelphia had done. One evening, about 2 weeks after Rose's arrival, they were sitting on the porch when Harrison suddenly said, "You have been sleeping in that small room since you arrived, but it is not comfortable. The bed is old and the room gets cold at night. I want you to know that the master bedroom is yours if you want it. I can move my things to the smaller room." Rose turned to look at him in surprise. "Harrison, that is your room. I would not take it from you. But you are my wife. You should have the better room." "We are married," Rose said carefully. "Perhaps we should share the master bedroom as married couples do." Harrison's expression was difficult to read in the fading light. "Rose, I do not want you to feel obligated. I know this marriage is not what you might have chosen for yourself if circumstances were different. I am content to wait until you are ready for that step." Rose felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, at the care and respect they conveyed. but she also felt a growing desire to truly become his wife, to move their relationship from polite cohabitation to genuine partnership. She had been watching Harrison over these 2 weeks, learning his character through his actions. She saw how gently he handled the animals, how fairly he treated his workers, how honestly he conducted his business. She saw his kindness in 100 small ways, in coffee made just how she liked it, in wildflowers left on the kitchen table, in his patience with her questions and mistakes. She was not in love with him yet, but she could feel the possibility of love growing between them like a seed planted in fertile soil. And she wanted to nurture that possibility, to give their marriage every chance to become something real and lasting. "I am ready," Rose said quietly. "If you are willing, I would like to be your wife in truth, Harrison." He looked at her for a long moment, searching her face. "Are you certain? I do not want you to feel pressured." "I am certain. You have been nothing but kind and patient with me. I think it is time we began building a real marriage together." That night, Rose moved her few belongings into the master bedroom, hanging her dresses beside Harrison's shirts in the wardrobe. The nervousness she felt was offset by a growing anticipation, a curiosity about this aspect of marriage she had only heard whispered about. Harrison was gentle and patient with her, taking his time despite his obvious desire. He made sure she was comfortable, that she was willing, checking with her at every step. The act itself was strange and awkward at first, but not unpleasant, and the intimacy of it, the vulnerability they shared, created a new bond between them. Afterwards, lying in the darkness with Harrison's arm around her, Rose felt tears prick her eyes. She had come to Missouri expecting nothing more than security and survival, but she was beginning to hope for so much more. She was beginning to hope for happiness, for partnership, maybe even for love. "Are you all right?" Harrison whispered, feeling the wetness of her tears against his shoulder. "Yes," Rose said, and realized it was true. "I am more than all right. I am home." She felt Harrison's lips press against her forehead, a tender gesture that spoke of affection and protection. "Good," he murmured, "because I cannot imagine this house without you in it now. You belong here, Rose, with me." The seasons changed gradually as summer gave way to autumn, painting the Missouri landscape in shades of gold and russet. Rose's life took on new depths and textures as she settled fully into her role as Harrison's wife and partner. The initial awkwardness between them had given way to an easy intimacy, a comfort in each other's presence that felt both surprising and inevitable. Rose discovered she had a natural aptitude for ranch life, taking on responsibilities that went far beyond simple housekeeping. She learned to tend the kitchen garden with skill, preserving vegetables for the winter months ahead. She mastered the art of baking bread in the temperamental wood stove, her loaves becoming a source of pride. She even learned to help with some of the lighter ranch work, feeding the chickens and gathering eggs, helping Samuel and Thomas with the occasional task that did not require significant physical strength. But it was the horses that truly captured Rose's heart. Harrison had a mare named Wildflower, a gentle creature with a coat the color of honey, and he began teaching Rose to ride. At first, Rose was terrified, clinging to the saddle horn with white knuckles while Harrison led Wildflower in slow circles around the corral. But gradually, her fear transformed into exhilaration, and soon she was riding with increasing confidence, exploring the ranch property on horseback with Harrison beside her. These rides became their favorite time together, hours stolen from the demands of work to simply enjoy each other's company and the beauty of the land. Harrison would point out wildlife, deer and rabbits and the occasional fox, and teach Rose to read the signs of weather in the clouds and wind. Rose would share stories from her books, describing places she had only read about, dreaming aloud about someday perhaps traveling to see them. "Maybe we will," Harrison said one afternoon as they rested their horses beside a small creek that cut through the property. "When the ranch is more established, when we can afford to hire more permanent help, maybe we could take a trip. Would you like that?" Rose's heart swelled at the "we" in his statement, at the assumption of a shared future filled with possibilities. "I would like that very much. But honestly, Harrison, I am happy here, happier than I thought I could be." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "So am I. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and have to remind myself that you are real, that you are actually here. I spent 3 years alone in that house, convinced I would grow old by myself, and then you stepped off that riverboat and everything changed." "I was terrified that day," Rose admitted. "Terrified you would take one look at me and be disappointed, that I would not be what you expected." "Disappointed?" Harrison laughed. "Rose, when I saw you standing on that dock trying so hard to be brave despite your fear, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And every day since, you have only become more beautiful to me. Not just your face, though that is certainly lovely, but your spirit, your strength, your kindness. You are everything I hoped for and so much more than I deserved." Rose felt tears sting her eyes, moved by the raw honesty in his words. In Philadelphia, men had complimented her appearance with flowery, meaningless phrases designed to flatter. But Harrison's words came from a place of deep sincerity, and they touched something fundamental in her soul. "I am falling in love with you," she said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. "I did not think it was possible to love someone I barely knew, someone I married out of necessity rather than choice. But I am, Harrison. I am falling in love with you." The smile that spread across Harrison's face was radiant with joy. He dismounted quickly and came to help Rose down from Wildflower, pulling her into his arms the moment her feet touched the ground. "I love you too," he said fiercely. "I have loved you since you first smiled at me over coffee in that hotel restaurant, since you started asking me questions about ranching like it actually mattered to you. I have been waiting for the right moment to tell you, afraid of saying it too soon and scaring you away." "You could never scare me away," Rose said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "This is my home now. You are my home." They made love there by the creek, in the dappled shade of cottonwood trees with the sound of water singing over stones. It was unhurried and tender, both of them taking time to explore and savor, their earlier awkwardness completely gone. Rose marveled at how natural it felt, how right, to be with Harrison in this way. He knew her body now, knew what made her gasp and sigh, and she was learning his responses in turn, discovering the power she had to affect him. Afterwards, they lay together on Harrison's spread coat, watching clouds drift across the blue sky. Rose rested her head on Harrison's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened her. She had not known such happiness was possible, had not dared to hope for it. "We should head back," Harrison said eventually, though he made no move to rise. "Samuel and Thomas will wonder where we disappeared to." "Let them wonder," Rose said, but she sat up anyway, reaching for her scattered clothing. "Though you are right. There is work to be done, and we should not shirk our responsibilities." As they rode back to the house, Rose caught Harrison watching her with a soft smile on his face. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "Nothing. Just thinking about how lucky I am." That evening, as Rose was preparing dinner, a wagon rolled up the drive carrying their nearest neighbors, the Patterson family. Harrison had mentioned them often, and Rose had been both curious and nervous about meeting them. They were the first visitors since her arrival, and she wanted to make a good impression. Margaret Patterson was a stout woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and capable hands. Her husband John was a quiet man who let his wife do most of the talking. They had brought two of their daughters with them, Mary, who was 20, and Elizabeth, who was 18, both pleasant-faced girls who eyed Rose with open curiosity. "We have been dying to meet you," Margaret announced, sweeping into the house with the confidence of an old friend. "Harrison kept you hidden away for weeks. We were beginning to think you were a figment of his imagination." "I am real enough," Rose said, warming to Margaret's forthright manner immediately. "I am pleased to meet you all. Please sit down. I was just making coffee." As the women settled at the kitchen table, and John went out to speak with Harrison about some ranch matter, Rose poured coffee and brought out the cookies she had baked that morning. Margaret peppered her with questions about Philadelphia, about her journey west, about her impressions of Missouri. Mary and Elizabeth chimed in with their own questions, eager to hear about city life and fashion. Rose answered as best she could, trying to satisfy their curiosity without sounding condescending or making it seem like she thought city life was superior. She found herself liking the Patterson women, appreciating their straightforward warmth and genuine interest. "Harrison is a good man," Margaret said eventually, her tone turning serious. "We have known him since he was a boy. His parents were dear friends of ours, and we worried about him being alone after they passed. We tried to match him with our girls here, but he was not interested." She shot a meaningful look at her daughters, who both blushed and protested. "Mother, we have told you." "Harrison is like a brother to us," Mary said firmly. "Besides, he was clearly waiting for someone special," Elizabeth added with a romantic sigh. "And now he has found her." Rose felt her own cheeks warm. "I hope I can be what he needs. This life is very different from what I knew, but I am learning." "You are doing fine," Margaret assured her. "Better than fine from what Harrison tells John. He says you have taken to ranch life like you were born to it. That is high praise from a man like Harrison. He does not say things he does not mean." The visit lasted several hours, and by the time the Pattersons left, Rose felt like she had made real friends. Margaret had invited them to dinner the following week, and the girls had promised to teach Rose how to can fruit and vegetables using techniques passed down from their grandmother. It was the beginning of a connection to the community that Rose had not realized she was craving. "They liked you," Harrison said that night as they lay in bed. "Margaret told John that I had chosen well, that you would fit in perfectly here. I liked them too. It is nice to have neighbors, to know we are not completely alone out here." "We are not alone," Harrison agreed, pulling her closer. "We have each other, and we have good people around us. That is all anyone really needs." The autumn weeks passed in a blur of activity as they prepared the ranch for winter. Harrison and his workers repaired fences, moved cattle to different pastures, and stockpiled hay and grain. Rose worked alongside them when she could, learning new skills and proving herself capable and strong. She helped slaughter chickens for preservation, canned dozens of jars of vegetables, and sewed warmer clothing for the cold months ahead. In November, an early snow came, blanketing the ranch in white and transforming the landscape into something magical and strange. Rose stood on the front porch, wrapped in a thick shawl, watching the fat flakes drift down from the gray sky. Harrison came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Beautiful, is it not?" he murmured against her ear. "It is," Rose agreed, "though I suspect it will lose its charm quickly when we have to work in it." Harrison chuckled. "Probably true. But for now, let us just enjoy it." They stood together watching the snow fall, and Rose felt Harrison's hand move to rest on her stomach. The gesture was casual, unconscious, but it made Rose think about something she had been wondering for the past few weeks. Her monthly courses, usually so reliable, had failed to appear. It was too early to be certain, but she suspected she might be carrying Harrison's child. The thought filled her with a mixture of excitement and fear. She wanted children, had always imagined herself as a mother, but the reality of it happening now so soon was overwhelming. And yet, when she imagined a baby with Harrison's dark hair and kind eyes, her heart swelled with love already. She decided to wait a bit longer before saying anything, wanting to be sure. But the secret glowed warm inside her, a small spark of new life that might be growing even as she stood there in her husband's arms, watching the first real snow of winter paint their world white. As December arrived, bringing with it harsher weather and longer nights, Rose's suspicions were confirmed. She was indeed pregnant, due to deliver sometime in the late summer. She told Harrison on a Sunday evening after they had returned from having dinner with the Pattersons, sitting him down in the parlor with a seriousness that made him immediately concerned. "What is wrong?" he asked, taking her hands. "You have been quiet all day. If something is troubling you, please tell me." "Nothing is wrong," Rose said quickly. "At least, I hope you will not think so. Harrison, I am expecting a baby. We are going to be parents." For a moment, Harrison just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile Rose had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the house. He pulled Rose into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Rose, this is the best news, the very best news." His joy was infectious, dissolving Rose's remaining fears. "You are truly happy about this?" "Happy. I am ecstatic. I am thrilled. I am terrified, but in the best possible way." He set her down gently, his hands moving to cradle her face. "You have given me so much already, Rose. A home, a partnership, love, and now a child. I cannot believe how blessed I am." "We are blessed," Rose corrected. "Both of us. This baby is a gift to both of us." That night, Harrison was extra gentle with her, treating her like she was made of glass. Rose found it both endearing and slightly frustrating, but she understood his protectiveness came from a place of love and fear. Neither of them had forgotten that Harrison's mother had given birth to 3 stillborn babies before Harrison was born, or that childbirth was dangerous even under the best circumstances. But Rose refused to live in fear. She was young and healthy, and she would face whatever came with the same courage that had brought her west in the first place. For now, she would focus on the joy of creating a new life with the man she loved, on the family they were building together. The winter months were hard but not unbearable. There were days when the cold was so intense that even stepping outside was dangerous, when they had to break ice in the water troughs multiple times a day, when the wind howled around the house like a living thing. But there were also peaceful days when the world was still and white and beautiful, when the work was satisfying, and the evenings cozy. Rose's pregnancy progressed well. She experienced some morning sickness in the early months, but nothing debilitating. Margaret Patterson visited regularly, bringing advice and encouragement, sharing stories of her own pregnancies and reassuring Rose that she was doing everything right. The Patterson daughters visited too, bringing small gifts for the baby and helping Rose sew tiny clothes and blankets. Harrison was attentive to the point of being overwhelming, constantly asking if Rose was comfortable, if she needed anything, if she was working too hard. Rose bore his fussing with patience, knowing it came from love, but she also insisted on maintaining her normal routines as much as possible. She refused to be treated like an invalid just because she was growing a child, As winter gave way to spring and the ranch came back to life, Rose's belly swelled with new life as well. She felt the baby quickening inside her, tiny flutters that grew into definite kicks and rolls. Harrison would spend hours with his hand on her stomach, feeling their child move, his face alight with wonder. "I cannot wait to meet this little person," he would say. "Do you think it will be a boy or a girl?" "I think it will be healthy," Rose would reply. "That is all that matters." But privately, Rose hoped for a boy first, a son who would look like his father and learn ranching from him. She could imagine Harrison teaching a little boy to ride, to rope cattle, to read the land and weather. The image filled her heart with warmth. Spring brought new challenges in the form of heavy rains that turned the roads to mud and the creek to a rushing torrent. Calving season kept Harrison and his workers busy day and night, helping bring new cattle into the world and ensuring their survival. Rose helped where she could, but her growing belly made some tasks impossible. One night in May, Harrison came to the house exhausted and covered in mud, having spent the entire day delivering a difficult calf. Rose had hot water ready for him to wash, and she helped him out of his filthy clothes, clucking over the bruises and scrapes he had acquired. "You work too hard," she scolded gently, washing his back with a soapy cloth. "So do you," Harrison countered. "Look at you, 8 months pregnant and still insisting on keeping the garden and the chickens and making enough food to feed an army." "I like staying busy. It makes the time pass faster." Harrison turned to face her, water dripping from his hair, his expression serious. "Rose, I want you to promise me something. When your time comes, promise me you will let Margaret and the doctor do their work. Promise me you will not be stubborn or brave. Promise me you will do whatever you need to do to stay safe." Rose heard the fear beneath his words, the terrible awareness that women died in childbirth all the time, that no amount of love or wanting could guarantee safety. She took his face in her hands, looking deep into his worried eyes. "I promise to do my best to come through this safely," she said. "But Harrison, you must promise me something too. If something happens, if you have to choose between me and the baby, you choose the baby. Promise me." "No," Harrison's voice was fierce. "I will not promise that. You are my wife, my love, my everything. I cannot lose you, Rose. I will not." "Harrison, please. No, we will both survive this. You and the baby. I cannot accept any other outcome." Rose saw the determination in his eyes and knew she could not argue further. She leaned forward and kissed him softly. "Then I will do my very best to give you that outcome for all of us." As her due date approached, Rose found herself growing anxious despite her best efforts to remain calm. The baby was active and seemed healthy, but the unknown nature of what lay ahead frightened her. Margaret had arranged for the local midwife, a skilled woman named Mrs. Kimball, to stay at the ranch when Rose's labor began. Harrison had made sure the house was stocked with everything they might need, had clean linens and water ready at all times. The baby decided to arrive on a hot August evening, 3 weeks before Rose's calculated due date. The pain started just after dinner, gentle at first, more uncomfortable than painful. Rose continued her normal activities for a while, not wanting to worry Harrison unnecessarily, but when the contractions grew stronger and closer together, she could no longer hide them. Harrison immediately sent Thomas to fetch Mrs. Kimball and Margaret, then helped Rose upstairs to their bedroom. His face was pale with worry, but he tried to stay calm for her sake, helping her change into a loose nightgown and supporting her through the contractions. Mrs. Kimball arrived quickly, a capable woman in her 50s who had delivered hundreds of babies. She examined Rose and pronounced everything normal, predicting the baby would arrive before midnight. Margaret arrived shortly after, taking charge of boiling water and preparing the necessary supplies. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Rose had not imagined such pain was possible, waves of it that crashed over her relentlessly, stealing her breath and her ability to think. But Harrison stayed with her through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement even when she snapped at him to be quiet. Finally, as the sun was rising and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, their son was born. He came into the world screaming lustily, a healthy baby boy with dark hair and red, wrinkled skin. Mrs. Kimball cleaned him quickly and placed him on Rose's chest, and Rose felt a love so overwhelming it brought tears streaming down her face. "He is perfect," she whispered, touching the baby's tiny fingers, his soft head. "Harrison, look at him. He is perfect." Harrison was crying too, unashamed tears running down his face as he gazed at his son. "He is. You did it, Rose. You were so brave. I am so proud of you." They named him Henry, after Harrison's father, with the last name Xavier, of course. Little Henry was a good baby, nursing eagerly and sleeping in peaceful stretches that allowed Rose to recover from the birth. Harrison was besotted from the first moment, holding his son with a combination of pride and terror, afraid he might break the tiny, perfect creature they had created. The weeks after Henry's birth were challenging as Rose recovered, and they adjusted to life with an infant. Rose was exhausted in ways she had never imagined possible, her body healing slowly while the demands of nursing and caring for Henry seemed constant. But Harrison was wonderful, taking over many of the household tasks, caring for Henry when he could to give Rose precious hours of sleep, never complaining about the disruption to their lives. Margaret and the Patterson girls were frequent visitors, bringing food and help, teaching Rose the countless small skills needed to care for an infant. Samuel and Thomas tiptoed around the house in those early days, treating Rose and the baby with awkward reverence, clearing their throats apologetically if Henry's crying disturbed them. As the summer faded into autumn and Henry grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, alert baby, Rose marveled at how much her life had transformed. 2 years ago, she had been alone and desperate in Philadelphia, facing an uncertain future. Now she was a wife and mother in Missouri, living a life she could never have imagined, blessed beyond measure. One evening in October, when Henry was 2 months old and sleeping peacefully in the cradle Harrison had built, Rose and Harrison sat on the front porch watching the sunset as they had done so many times before. Harrison held Rose's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Truly happy?" Rose thought about the question, about everything that had brought her to this moment. The journey on the riverboat, the nervousness of meeting Harrison at the dock, the awkwardness of their first days together, the gradual blossoming of affection into love. She thought about the hard work and the simple pleasures, the challenges overcome and the joys discovered. She thought about the tiny baby sleeping inside, the son she and Harrison had created together. "I am happier than I ever thought possible," Rose said honestly. "When I left Philadelphia, I was running from a life I could not bear. I never imagined I was running towards something so wonderful. You have given me everything, Harrison. A home, a family, a purpose. You have given me love." "You gave those things to me too," Harrison said. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You brought light and laughter and hope back into this house. You made it a home again. And now, with Henry, our family is complete." Rose squeezed his hand, content in the moment but also thinking about the future. "Perhaps not quite complete. I would like more children if we are blessed with them, brothers and sisters for Henry." "I would like that too," Harrison agreed, But there is no rush. For now, let us just enjoy what we have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from blue to pink to purple, the first stars beginning to appear. From inside the house came a small cry as Henry woke from his nap, and both Rose and Harrison smiled at the sound. "I will get him," Harrison said, standing. "You sit and rest." Rose watched her husband disappear into the house and listened to his gentle voice as he spoke to their son. She heard Henry's cries quiet, soothed by his father's presence, and felt her heart swell with love for both of them. This was her life now. This was her family. And it was more than she had ever dared to dream. The years that followed were filled with the ordinary magic of daily life. Henry grew from a baby into a toddler, stumbling around the ranch on chubby legs, getting into everything with fearless enthusiasm. Harrison was a patient, devoted father, teaching Henry about the animals and the land, carrying him on his shoulders during the daily ranch work. When Henry was 2 years old, Rose discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no fear or uncertainty, only joy and anticipation. She carried the second baby easily, continuing her work around the ranch with practiced efficiency, chasing after the energetic Henry even as her belly grew large. Their daughter was born in April, a quick labor that took them all by surprise. Harrison barely had time to fetch Mrs. Kimball before little Ruth made her appearance, a tiny, delicate baby girl with Rose's copper hair and Harrison's brown eyes. Henry was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to hold her constantly, bringing her flowers and interesting rocks and other treasures he found around the ranch. With 2 children, life became busier and more chaotic, but also richer. The house was filled with laughter and noise, the sounds of children playing, of Ruth's cries and Henry's endless questions. Harrison expanded the house, adding another bedroom and enlarging the kitchen to accommodate their growing family. The ranch prospered under Harrison's careful management and Rose's contributions. They were able to hire 2 more permanent hands, allowing Harrison more time with his family. They bought more land, expanded the herd, and became known throughout the region for the quality of their cattle and horses. Rose maintained her friendships with the Patterson family and other neighbors, hosting dinners and helping with community events. She taught Sunday school at the church where she and Harrison had married, finding fulfillment in working with the children and contributing to the life of the community. When Henry was 5 and Ruth was 3, Rose gave birth to another son, whom they named Samuel after one of Harrison's loyal workers. Samuel was a quiet, serious baby who grew into a thoughtful child, content to sit and observe rather than charging headlong into adventure like his older brother. As the children grew, Rose marveled at their different personalities and how they each reflected different aspects of their parents. Henry had Harrison's love of the land and practical nature, already determined to be a rancher like his father. Ruth was curious and bookish like Rose, constantly asking to be read to and making up elaborate stories about the world around her. Samuel was a perfect balance of both, observant and thoughtful but also capable and strong. Harrison was an exceptional father, patient and loving, teaching his children about integrity and hard work through example. He never raised his voice in anger, never resorted to harsh punishments, but instead guided them with gentle firmness and unwavering love. Rose watched him with their children and fell more deeply in love with him with each passing year. Their marriage had grown deeper and richer over time, the initial passion evolving into something more profound. They knew each other completely now, understood each other's moods and needs without words. They had weathered difficulties together, survived hard winters and droughts, financial worries and the childhood illnesses that terrified all parents. Through it all, Their partnership had remained strong, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. When Rose was 35 years old, their final child was born, another daughter they named Margaret after Rose's dear friend. By then, Henry was 12, Ruth was 10, and Samuel was 7. The older children were delighted with their baby sister, fighting over who got to hold her and help care for her. Harrison was 41 by then, his dark hair now threaded with silver, his face lined by years of working in the sun and wind. But to Rose, he had never been more handsome. He was the man she loved, the father of her children, her partner in every aspect of life. When she looked at him, she did not see age or change. She saw the nervous young man who had waited at the dock 13 years ago with open arms and an open heart, willing to take a chance on a mail-order bride from Philadelphia. One evening, after the children were all in bed and the house was quiet, Harrison and Rose sat on the front porch as they had done countless times over the years. Harrison pulled Rose close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "Do you ever think about that day at the dock?" Harrison asked. "When you first arrived." "All the time," Rose admitted. "I was so frightened. I had no idea what I was walking into, what kind of man you would be. I was prepared for disappointment, for regret. I never imagined I would find this." "This," Harrison prompted. "Everything. Love, happiness, purpose, family, a life worth living. You gave me all of that, Harrison." "We gave it to each other," Harrison corrected gently. "I was just as lost as you were, Rose, just as lonely and uncertain. We built this life together, brick by brick, day by day, and I would not change a single moment of it." Rose tilted her head to look up at her husband, seeing the truth of his words in his eyes. "Not even the hard parts, the struggles and the fears, not even those, because they made us stronger. They taught us what we were capable of, how deep our love could go. And they led us here, to this moment, with our children sleeping safely inside and our whole lives ahead of us still." Rose kissed him then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 13 years of love and partnership and commitment. When they pulled apart, she smiled at him, her heart full to overflowing. "I love you, Harrison Xavier. I loved you when I stepped off that riverboat and saw you waiting for me. I loved you when we married as strangers. I loved you when we became partners and parents. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Harrison's eyes glistened with tears. "And I love you, Rose Xavier. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy all those years ago. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sound of one of the children stirring, and both of them smiled at the familiar noise. This was their life. This was their legacy. A family built on love and trust. A ranch built through hard work and dedication. A partnership that had started with desperation and blossomed into something precious and enduring. Rose thought back to that frightened young woman on the riverboat, traveling toward an uncertain future with nothing but hope and determination. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that the man waiting at the dock would exceed every hope and dream. She wished she could tell her younger self that the risk was worth taking, that the fear would give way to joy, that love could be found in the most unexpected places. But maybe that young woman had known, deep down. Maybe that was why she had been brave enough to step onto that dock all those years ago, to put her hand in Harrison's and trust him to guide her into a new life. Maybe that was why she had opened her heart to love, despite every reason to guard it carefully. As the years continued to pass, the Xavier Ranch became a landmark in the region, known for its prosperity and the integrity of its owners. Henry grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the ranch operations, working alongside his father with pride and skill. Ruth became a teacher, educating children in the growing town that had sprung up a few miles from the ranch. Samuel developed a talent for horse breeding, building a reputation that brought buyers from across the state. Young Margaret showed promise in everything she attempted, a bright, curious child who reminded everyone of her mother. Harrison and Rose grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces lined with years of living and loving. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming something solid and unshakable, the foundation upon which their entire family was built. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch, inviting neighbors and friends from miles around. The house was filled with laughter and music, with grandchildren running through the rooms and old friends sharing stories of years past. Margaret Patterson, now in her 70s but still spry and sharp-tongued, gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes, speaking of young love and enduring commitment, of the mail-order bride who had arrived with nothing but courage and the cowboy who had waited with open arms. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Rose and Harrison slipped away to their favorite spot on the front porch. The moon was full and bright, illuminating the ranch in silvery light, and the air was warm with the promise of summer. 30 years, Rose marveled, leaning against Harrison's shoulder. Has it really been 30 years? Hard to believe, is it not? Feels like yesterday and forever all at once. Do you have any regrets? Rose asked, a question she had never dared voice before. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, and Rose held her breath, suddenly afraid of his answer. But when he spoke, his voice was strong and certain. My only regret is that we have only one lifetime together. I wish for a dozen more, 100 more, an eternity of lives to spend loving you. But since we have only this one, I am grateful for every moment of it. You made my life complete, Rose. You gave me everything that matters. Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks, tears of joy and love and gratitude. I feel the same way. I came to Missouri expecting survival. You gave me life, real and full and beautiful. I will be grateful for that until my dying day. They sat together under the stars, holding hands as they had done 1,000 times before, as comfortable with each other as they had been nervous that first day at the dock. Their children were settled and happy, their grandchildren healthy and thriving, their ranch prosperous and their legacy secure. But more than any of that, they had each other. They had love, deep and true and lasting. They had built something together that would endure long after they were gone, a family and a home rooted in respect and affection and commitment. As Rose drifted off to sleep that night in Harrison's arms, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The riverboat cutting through muddy waters, carrying her toward an unknown future. The nervous cowboy waiting at the dock, hoping against hope that the woman he had written to would be someone he could love. The simple wedding, the awkward first days, the gradual building of trust and affection. Every step had been necessary, every challenge a building block. The fears and uncertainties had been as important as the joys and triumphs. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that had started with desperation and blossomed into happiness. In the darkness, Harrison pulled Rose closer, and she settled against him with a contented sigh. This was home. This was love. This was everything she had been searching for without even knowing it, found in the arms of a cowboy who had waited for her with open arms and an open heart. And as sleep claimed her, Rose smiled, grateful beyond words for the riverboat journey that had changed her life, for the courage to step onto that dock, and for the man who had been waiting there to catch her, to keep her safe, to love her forever. Their story had begun with uncertainty and risk, two strangers coming together out of necessity and hope. But it had become something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a testament to the power of love, to the magic that could happen when two people opened their hearts and committed to building a life together. The riverboat had long since moved on to carry other passengers to other destinations. The dock where they had first met had been rebuilt several times over the years, but the love that had started there remained constant and true, growing stronger with each passing year, an anchor in the storms and a celebration in the sunshine. Harrison and Rose Xavier had taken a leap of faith 30 years ago, trusting in the possibility of love with a stranger. They had worked hard, faced challenges together, raised a family, and built a legacy. But most importantly, they had loved each other with everything they had, creating a bond that would last beyond their lifetimes, living on in their children and grandchildren, and in the story that would be told for generations to come. The story of a mail-order bride who traveled by riverboat toward an uncertain future, and the cowboy who waited at the dock with open arms, ready to build a life with her. The story of two lonely people who found each other and created something beautiful. The story of love, true and lasting and real, that began with courage and endured through time. As the years continued on, Harrison and Rose remained pillars of their community, their wisdom sought by younger couples, their home always open to those in need. They witnessed the changing world together, saw technologies advance and society evolve, but their values remained constant. They taught their children and grandchildren about integrity, hard work, and the importance of love and family above all else. When Harrison was 70 and Rose was 64, they took the trip they had once dreamed about, traveling by train to see the ocean and visiting cities they had only read about. It was an adventure made sweeter by the years of shared life behind them, every new sight and experience a gift they gave each other. But they were both relieved to return home to Missouri, to the ranch, and the family that meant everything to them. Their final years were peaceful ones, spent mostly on the front porch watching their grandchildren play, telling stories of the old days, and simply enjoying each other's presence. They had earned their rest, had built something lasting and beautiful that would continue long after they were gone. Harrison passed away first, at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Rose beside him. Rose grieved deeply but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the life they had built together, in the knowledge that they had loved each other well and fully. She lived another 5 years, spending that time ensuring the ranch's continued success and preparing the next generation to carry on the Xavier legacy. When Rose finally joined Harrison, she was laid to rest beside him on the hill behind the house, under the cottonwood tree where Harrison's parents were buried, where the sunset could be seen painting the sky in brilliant colors every evening. Their children erected a simple stone marker that read, "Harrison and Rose Xavier, partners in life, united in love, together forever." The ranch continued to thrive under Henry's management, passed down through the Xavier family for generations. The house was expanded and modernized, but the front porch remained, a sacred place where family members still gathered to watch the sunset and remember the couple who had built it all. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the breeze was just right and the stars were bright overhead, it seemed like Harrison and Rose were still there, sitting together in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching over the family and the home they had created with courage, determination, and love. Their story became legend in the region, told and retold to new generations. The mail-order bride from Philadelphia who had traveled by riverboat toward an uncertain future. The lonely cowboy who had waited at the dock with open arms and an open heart. Two strangers who had taken a chance on each other and built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story of hope triumphing over fear, of love found in unexpected places, of two people who had committed to each other and never wavered, no matter what challenges they faced. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that love was worth the risk, that family was the greatest blessing, and that a life built on trust and commitment could withstand anything. The legacy of Harrison and Rose Xavier lived on not just in their descendants, but in the values they had embodied and passed down. Hard work, integrity, kindness, courage, and above all, love, deep and true and unwavering, the kind of love that made everything else possible. From that first moment on the dock in Independence, Missouri, in the summer of 1872, to their final days together decades later, Harrison and Rose had lived a love story for the ages. They had taken the raw materials of necessity and desperation and transformed them into something precious and enduring. They had proved that love did not require ideal circumstances or perfect conditions. It required only two people willing to open their hearts, to work together, to commit to building something lasting, and build they did. A marriage, a family, a home. A legacy that would endure for generations. Rooted in that first brave decision Rose had made to board a riverboat and travel toward an unknown future, and Harrison's equally brave decision to wait at the dock with open arms, ready to love and be loved. Their story was complete, their lives well lived, their love eternal. And the ranch they had built together stood as a testament to what was possible when two people found each other against all odds and chose to build a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love at a time. In the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the land or the wealth, or even the children and grandchildren, precious though they were. The greatest legacy was the proof that love could conquer fear, that strangers could become soulmates, that a desperate gamble could become the greatest blessing, and that sometimes the best things in life came from the courage to step into the unknown and trust that someone would be waiting on the other side with open arms. Harrison and Rose Xavier had done exactly that, and in doing so they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something that would be remembered and celebrated long after they were gone. A love story, a family story, a story of the American West, of hardship and triumph, of ordinary people creating extraordinary lives through commitment and courage and unwavering love. Their story was finished now, complete and perfect in its way. But the love they had created lived on, generation after generation, a light that would never be extinguished, a warmth that would never fade, a legacy that would endure as long as their descendants remembered the mail-order bride who had traveled by riverboat and the cowboy who had waited at the dock with open arms, ready to catch her, to keep her, to love her forever.